You ever wonder what it feels like to wake up one day and realize you've just been handed off like a sack of potatoes? Yeah, that's how it started for me. 17 years old, wrists still burning from where the rope cut, face stinging from a slap I never even saw coming, and my own father, the only family I'd ever known. He didn't ask questions. He just hauled me out to the edge of the world, dumped me on a stranger's porch, and rode off like he was tossing out the garbage, not his own daughter. Didn't even say goodbye. Just a grunt, boots crunching through snow, then nothing but silence and my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. Let me back up a sec. Because the man waiting for me in that cabin, Rourke, he wasn't the monster I'd been warned about. He just looked through me, past me, shoulders broad enough to block the doorway, eyes dark as river ice. No smile, not even a word, just pointed at the door and vanished into the shed like I was no more trouble than the sack of feed tossed at his feet. Inside, the firelight stretched shadows long across the floor, flickering over a cot, a battered table, and the kind of shotgun you don't ever want pointed your way. I remember sinking to the hearth, clutching my belly, the secret growing inside me, the one my father hadn't cared enough to ask about. He just called it my shame, said it'd rot his house if I stayed. And that was all it took to load me up, drag me out, and throw me to the wolves, or to this wolf anyway. Rourke was gone. The wind shut the door behind me, and I sat there, counting the bruises on my arms, wondering what came next. The answer was nothing, for a while. Rourke moved around me like I was made of glass, or maybe just invisible. Every day, he'd be gone before first light, back after dark, never asking, never telling. I cooked what I could, cleaned, because that's what I'd seen my mother do before she died. But nothing I did seemed to matter. He didn't eat with me, didn't even look at me. Until the day I woke with blood soaking my dress. I screamed. I did, not because I was scared for myself, but for that tiny flutter inside me, the only thing left that was still mine. Rourke burst in, axe forgotten in the snow, and without a word, carried me to the cot, wrapped every fur he could find around me, and for hours sat beside me, just a shadow in the firelight, waiting to see if I'd lose the baby or not. I didn't. And after that, something small shifted, almost too subtle to notice. He wasn't kind, not really, don't get me wrong. Rourke didn't become some gentle hero overnight, but he started leaving an extra bowl at dinner, patching my boots when they split, folding a clean blanket near the fire, silent gestures that said more than words ever could. There was a storm, 5 days of howling wind. Snow piled higher than my knees. We barely spoke, just enough to keep the roof from leaking or the fire from dying. But on the third night, when I slipped on the ice fetching water, he bandaged my elbow with hands gentler than I expected, and for the first time, he met my eyes. "I'm not your father," he said, voice so low I nearly missed it. "I won't hit you. You know what I mean?" That's the kind of promise you remember. I'd never heard it before. Weeks blurred together. He left gifts, a wooden bird on the sill, bread by the hearth, never claimed. Never explained. My belly grew, and so did my courage. I started asking questions. He always answered plain, nothing more. I asked why he took me in. "Owed your father," he said, voice thick with something like regret. "He saved my life once, pulled me from a river when I was drunk and stupid. Never let me forget it. He didn't know about the baby, not at first. My father just told him I was difficult. That word stung, but I let it pass. Because by then, I could see Rourke wasn't cruel, just lost, like me. Then came the twist. Seth, my little brother, thin as a rail and scared out of his wits, showed up on the porch. Turns out, after our father ran out on the town, after the preacher's son was caught in his own lies, Ma told Seth the truth and sent him to find me. I was supposed to be dead, that's what they'd all heard. Seth changed everything. Suddenly, it wasn't just me and Rourke anymore, but a scrappy boy needing a place to belong, a family we were piecing back together one day at a time. When the baby came, a girl, fierce and loud and perfect, we named her Hope. Rourke, for all his gruffness, handled the birth like he'd done it 100 times, though I knew he hadn't. He cut the cord, wrapped her up, handed her to me like she was something sacred. "She's everything I didn't think I'd get to have," I whispered. He nodded, eyes glossy, though he'd never admit it. Life found a rhythm. Seth did chores, Rourke carved toys and fixed leaks. I cooked and rocked Hope through long mountain nights. The outside world crept back in with letters, threats. rocks through windows, but we learned to stand together. One night, men from town, sent by the preacher, tried to scare us off. Rourke and I stood our ground. Seth, bold as brass, climbed a tree and shouted them down. The marshal arrived in time to see us holding our own, and that was the end of it, at least for a while. But the mountain has a way of teaching you that peace is never permanent. The sheriff showed up next, ledger in hand, saying the preacher and my father had sold girls, bartered them like cattle. It made me cold, hearing it laid out so plain, knowing I was just one name on a list. He asked me to testify, to help stop it for good. I didn't want to go back, but Rourke said I'd earned my peace, that I could help others. I stood in court and told my story, about being thrown away, about finding something like freedom, about surviving when I was supposed to disappear. People listened. Laws changed. The preacher vanished. My father died in prison, forgotten by everyone but me. Years rolled by. Hope grew tall. Seth grew strong. Rourke grayer and slower, but never less steady. The cabin filled with laughter, with scars and love and stories we'd never have chosen, but made our own anyway. Rourke carved a ring from walnut wood, slipped it on my finger, and called me trouble with a half-smile. We saved each other, he'd say, and I believed him. He passed one winter, quiet as snowfall. We buried him beneath the spruce, Seth and Hope beside me. The family we built out of all that pain. I'm old now, silver-haired, hands stiff, but my heart's lighter than it ever was. People still talk about June, the girl who was traded like livestock but came back swinging. They forget the men who tried to break me, but they remember the woman who stood up and changed something, even if it was just a little. On clear nights, I sit on the porch, the mountain humming beneath my feet, and I know peace doesn't come easy. It's something you earn, piece by piece, and if you're lucky, you get to keep it long enough to pass it on. So tell me, after everything, what do you think is right? Is it justice? Forgiveness? Or is it just finding the strength to build something better from what others tried to destroy? Let me know what you'd have done. Would you have run, or would you have stood your ground? Drop your thoughts below, because stories like mine don't end. They keep echoing in anyone brave enough to listen. You know, people always ask what happened after. Like the day you finally stand up to the world that tried to bury you. Everything's supposed to get easy. You survive the storm, win your name back. Stare down the men who called you trouble, and think, maybe, just maybe, that's the end of it. But life's not a story with neat endings. It's messier than that. The world keeps turning, and so do you. Trying to catch your breath in the quiet left behind. The first real winter after the trial was like nothing I'd known. Quiet, not empty, but not full of fear either. I'd catch myself listening for footsteps in the snow, waiting for another letter or a shout from the treeline, but it never came. Instead, the silence was broken by the sounds of family. Hope learning to walk, her giggle echoing off the cabin walls, Seth's boots thudding as he stomped mud off by the fire. Rourke's low voice humming old tunes as he whittled animals for Hope's growing collection. I found peace in the small things, steam curling off mugs in the morning, quilts stitched by my own hands. The way Seth and Rourke could work together in silence, and it felt like music. But there were scars, too. I'd see them every time I brushed Hope's hair from her eyes. Every time Seth flinched at a raised voice. Every time the wind howled, and I remembered how it used to sound like warning. Sometimes Rourke would wake at night, silent and still, and I knew his dreams were full of rivers and cold. But he never spoke of them. He just pulled me closer, like the warmth between us was enough to keep the past away. Maybe it was. Spring thawed more than the snow. Seth started laughing louder, running wild through the trees, chasing after Hope, who was fast as a rabbit by then, her little boots kicking up the last of the brown leaves. She never seemed afraid. She'd wander near the edge of the woods, find sticks and stones, hand them to Rourke with that wide, expectant grin. And he'd make something out of nothing, a whistle, a carved bear, a tiny bird she'd tuck in her pocket for luck. And me? I was still learning how to let myself rest. Sometimes I'd catch my reflection in the basin, see the woman I'd become, face fuller, eyes not quite so guarded, smile coming easier, even when the day was long. The mountain changed me. But I changed the mountain, too. I planted flowers where the snow first melted, hung colored cloth in the windows, baked bread that filled the cabin with something sweet. We made new traditions, honey cakes for birthdays, wildflower crowns in June, Seth's crooked banjo playing whenever we had a reason to celebrate. But just when you think you're done fighting, trouble finds a way to sneak back in. Late one autumn, a stranger came up the path. Not the sheriff, not Bram the marshal, but a lawman from farther off, graying, sharp-eyed, with a ledger tucked under his arm and questions in his gaze. "I need your story, June," he said, hat in hand. "Not just for you, for all the girls whose names are still hidden between those pages." I stood on the porch, heart thumping, the mountain cold biting my cheeks, and I realized the story wasn't done with me yet. I told him what he needed. Every ugly detail. Every crack in the old world that let men trade girls like cattle and call it righteousness. He listened. He took notes. He promised things would change. Maybe they did. Maybe not as much as he hoped. But the words were out there now. Written, spoken, unable to be buried again. That night, I sat by the fire, hope in my lap, Rourke's hand warm on my knee, and felt something like release. My life wasn't just my own anymore. It was a warning, a lesson, maybe even a map for anyone lost in the dark. There was still sorrow. The day Hope asked about her father, the one who'd left me behind, I told her the truth, gentle but honest. That love doesn't always look like it should. That sometimes the family you build is the only one that matters. She nodded, wise for a child, and crawled into Rourke's arms, calling him Papa with all the certainty in the world. Seth listened from the corner, silent but watching, eyes bright. He'd started writing letters to town, checking in on the girls whose names we'd found, sending what little help we could, seeds, clothes, news from the mountain. And then came the day we had to say goodbye. Rourke grew slow, his beard turning silver, joints aching in the morning, cough never quite leaving his chest. He fought it, of course, split wood till his hands bled, built a bigger cradle for Hope, taught Seth how to hunt with patience, not just skill. But time gets us all. One night, he slipped away with me beside him, my hand in his last breath softer than any word he'd ever spoken. We buried him beneath the old spruce, Seth crying openly, Hope laying her fox carving on the earth. The mountain held us close, and I realized he'd never really left. He was in every nail, every floorboard, every scar and story. He was the quiet in the storm and the strength in our bones. Years passed, gentle as new snow. Hope grew up wild and free, running the ridge with Seth's children, her laughter ringing down the valley. I stayed in the cabin, hair silver now, hands rough, but spirit unbroken. Sometimes Bram would visit, bring stories and sugar, and we'd sit by the fire swapping memories like cards. Townsfolk started calling me the Mountain Woman, not with scorn, but with a kind of awe, like maybe I'd wrestled something from the wilderness no one else could tame. One summer evening, after Hope's birthday, I sat on the porch as the sun dipped low, the world soft and golden. Seth's family was inside, Bram snoring by the hearth, Hope chasing fireflies in the grass. I listened to the mountain hum beneath me, felt Rourke's presence in the breeze, and wondered if anyone down in the valley could ever really understand how hard it is to build a life from ruins. So that's it, my story, at least the part one can give you now. I ain't a hero. I'm not brave by nature. I just survived, and in surviving, found something worth holding on to. Maybe that's all any of us can do. And maybe, just maybe, when folks hear stories like mine, they'll think twice before casting out their own, before judging what they don't understand, before letting fear win out over love. Now it's your turn. What do you think justice really is? Is it punishment, forgiveness, or something messier in between? If you had to choose, would you fight, would you forgive, or would you run? Because in the end, all any of us get is a chance, a single chance, to turn pain into something lasting. So don't waste it. Speak up, share your truth, and remember, sometimes, the family you fight for isn't the one you're born with. It's the one you choose every single day. Let me know your thoughts below. Who would you have stood with? What would you have risked for peace? Your voice matters. Don't let the silence win.